The winter of 1872 descended upon the New Mexico territory with a cruelty that even the oldest settlers struggled to remember. Snow fell in relentless sheets, transforming the rust-colored mesas into ghostly white monuments. The wind howled through the canyons like the voices of ancient spirits, and the cold bit through even the thickest wool with teeth of pure ice. Amber Lockhart pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window of the carriage, watching her breath create fleeting patterns on the glass. The landscape outside was beautiful in its harshness, endless expanses of white, broken only by the dark silhouettes of piñon pines bending under the weight of snow. It was nothing like Philadelphia, where winter meant elegant sleigh rides through manicured parks and warm drawing rooms filled with the chatter of society matrons. "Miss Lockhart, please keep away from the window," her chaperone, Mrs. Adelaide Pemberton, said sharply from the opposite seat. The older woman's face was pinched with cold and disapproval in equal measure. "We're passing through dangerous territory. The savages could be anywhere." Amber wanted to roll her eyes but refrained. Mrs. Pemberton had been lecturing her about the dangers of the frontier since they'd left St. Louis 3 weeks ago. According to the chaperone, everything west of the Mississippi was designed specifically to endanger proper young ladies, from the rough miners and cowboys to the unforgiving landscape itself. But it was the Apache that Mrs. Pemberton feared most of all. "They're demons in human form," she'd said more than once, clutching her Bible. "Heathens who know nothing of civilization or Christian mercy. If we encounter them, pray they kill us quickly rather than—" And here she would trail off, leaving the horrors to Amber's imagination. Amber wasn't sure what to believe. Her father, Winston Lockhart, had built his fortune in steel and railroads, but lately he'd been investing in the vast cattle ranches and mining operations of the Southwest. He'd sent Amber to the territory for 2 reasons. First, to oversee some business matters at the ranch he'd recently acquired near Santa Fe, and second, to meet her intended husband. Thomas Whitmore was everything a father could want for his daughter. He was respectable, educated at Yale, from a good Boston family, and now making his fortune as a lawyer and land agent in Santa Fe. He was 35, stable, and according to her father's letters, quite taken with your photograph. They'd never met. The arrangement was common enough among families of their class, a practical union that would strengthen both families' positions in this rapidly developing territory. Thomas would gain access to her father's capital and connections. Amber would gain the security and respectability of marriage to a proper gentleman. It should have been everything she wanted. But as the carriage rocked through the frozen landscape, Amber couldn't shake the hollow feeling in her chest. At 23, she'd already rejected 3 proposals back in Philadelphia, much to her mother's despair. Each man had been perfectly acceptable. Each had courted her with the requisite flowers and poetry. Each had bored her to tears within an hour. "A life without salt," she'd murmured to herself one night after yet another tedious dinner party, standing alone on her family's terrace overlooking the city. "Is that all there is?" Her younger sister Caroline had laughed when Amber confessed her restlessness. "You've read too many novels," Caroline had said. "You're waiting for some dashing hero to sweep you off your feet. But this is real life, Amber. Real life is about duty, family, and making sensible choices." Amber knew Caroline was right. She tried to convince herself of it 1,000 times. But deep in her heart, in a place she barely acknowledged even to herself, she hoped that life held something more, something deeper, something that would make her feel truly alive. She just hadn't expected to find it in the middle of a frozen New Mexico mountain pass. The carriage lurched suddenly, and Amber gripped the seat to steady herself. Outside, she heard the driver, Mr. Hastings, calling to the horses in a voice tight with alarm. The 2 armed guards riding alongside, hired in Santa Fe specifically for this dangerous leg of the journey, were shouting something she couldn't quite make out over the wind. Mrs. Pemberton's face had gone white. "What is it? What's happening?" Amber pressed closer to the window, trying to see. At first there was only snow, endless, blinding white. Then, like shadows materializing from mist, she saw them. Riders. They appeared on both sides of the narrow mountain road, emerging from the pine forest with an almost supernatural silence. Even through the snowfall, Amber could see they were Apache warriors, perhaps a dozen of them, mounted on horses that seemed as comfortable in the deep snow as mountain goats on rock faces. The warriors wore thick furs over leather clothing, their long black hair bound with strips of cloth and adorned with feathers. Some carried rifles. Others had bows slung across their backs, but it was their stillness that struck Amber most, the way they sat their horses without urgency, without aggression, simply present and immovable as the mountains themselves. The carriage shuddered to a halt. "Don't move," one of the guards hissed. "Don't even breathe loud." Mrs. Pemberton had begun praying in a rapid whisper, her fingers working the beads of her rosary. Merciful heavens, protect us from evil." But Amber couldn't look away from the window. The warriors were circling the carriage now, their horses' hooves leaving deep tracks in the fresh snow. They moved with perfect coordination, like a dance they'd performed 1,000 times. There was no chaos, no shouting, just silent, methodical control. And then she saw him. He sat slightly ahead of the others, mounted on a magnificent paint horse, whose coat seemed to glow against the white landscape. He was taller than the other warriors, his shoulders broad beneath a heavy buffalo robe. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips set in a line that suggested he rarely smiled. His hair fell past his shoulders, black as a raven's wing, with 2 eagle feathers woven into a braid at his temple. But it was his eyes that stopped Amber's breath in her chest. Even at a distance, even through the falling snow and the frosted window, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. He was looking directly at the carriage, directly at her window, with an expression that was neither hostile nor friendly. It was something else entirely, something searching. Without thinking, Amber lifted her hand from the seat and placed it against the window glass, as if reaching toward him. His eyes flickered to the movement. For a moment, just a heartbeat, his expression shifted. Something crossed his face that might have been surprise, or recognition, or curiosity. The hard line of his mouth softened, almost imperceptibly. They stared at each other across the impossible distance of the carriage window, the falling snow, the vast gulf between their worlds. Amber felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She should be terrified. Every story she'd heard, every warning Mrs. Pemberton had issued, every newspaper account of frontier violence, all of it should have had her cowering in fear. But she wasn't afraid. Instead, she felt something she'd never experienced before, a pull, as inexorable as gravity, as inevitable as the tide. It was as if some part of her that had been dormant her entire life had suddenly awakened, recognizing something essential in this stranger's eyes. Time seemed to suspend. The wind stopped howling. The cold receded. There was only the 2 of them, locked in this moment of impossible connection. Then one of the other warriors, an older man with gray threading through his hair, said something in Apache. The words were low and carried the tone of a question. The man on the paint horse didn't respond immediately. He continued to stare at Amber's window, his dark eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, he raised one hand, not in threat, but in what might have been acknowledgement. He turned his horse with the slightest pressure of his knees and spoke a few words to his warriors. They responded immediately, pulling their horses back from the carriage and reforming their line along the side of the road. The message was clear. The passage was granted. Mr. Hastings didn't wait for a second invitation. He snapped the reins and the horses lurched forward, their hooves struggling for purchase in the deep snow. The guards kept their hands on their weapons, but didn't raise them. Within moments, the carriage was moving again, leaving the Apache warriors behind in the swirling white. Amber twisted in her seat, pressing her face to the rear window. Through the snow, she could just make out the silhouette of the man on the paint horse. He hadn't moved. He was still watching, a dark figure against the endless white, until the bend in the road took him from her view. "Merciful heavens," Mrs. Pemberton gasped, her face shining with perspiration despite the cold. "We could have been killed, scalped, worse. Oh, Miss Lockhart, we must give thanks for our deliverance." But Amber wasn't listening. She turned back to the front window, her hand still pressed against the glass where she'd reached toward him. Her palm had left a mark in the frost, a fleeting impression that even now was fading in the cold. Something had changed. In that moment, in that exchange of glances that lasted no more than seconds, something fundamental had shifted inside her. It was as if a door she hadn't known existed had been thrown open, letting in light she'd never seen before. She didn't know his name. didn't know anything about him except what her eyes had told her, that he was strong, commanding, and possessed of a presence that made the very air around him seem charged with energy. But she knew with a certainty that defied all logic that she would never forget him. And somehow, impossibly, she sensed that he wouldn't forget her either. The ranch her father had acquired, the Double L named for the Lockhart family, sat in a valley 20 miles outside Santa Fe. It was a sprawling operation with several thousand head of cattle, dozens of horses, and a large adobe hacienda that had been built by Spanish settlers decades earlier. The ranch manager, a weathered Texan named Bill Crawford, met them at the gates. "Welcome to New Mexico, Miss Lockhart," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His eyes were kind, despite his gruff manner. "Your father's wired ahead. We've got your rooms ready, and Mr. Whitmore will be calling tomorrow afternoon to pay his respects." Amber thanked him, but her mind was still in the mountains, replaying that moment of connection over and over. She barely noticed the grandeur of the hacienda, the heavy wooden furniture, the thick wool rugs, the massive stone fireplace that dominated the main room. That night, lying in a bed far more comfortable than any she'd slept in since leaving St. Louis, Amber stared at the ceiling and wondered about the Apache warrior. Who was he? What had he been thinking when he looked at her? And why did she feel as if something irreversible had happened in that exchange of glances? She told herself she was being ridiculous. It had been nothing, a brief encounter on a dangerous road, no different than passing a stranger on a Philadelphia street. She would never see him again. She would marry Thomas Whitmore, become a respectable rancher's wife, and forget all about the man with the eagle feathers in his hair. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. Some part of her, some deep, primal part, that had nothing to do with reason or duty or the expectations of her world, had recognized him, and that recognition had lit a fire inside her that she suspected would never truly go out. Outside her window, snow continued to fall on the New Mexico mountains, covering everything in white silence, and somewhere out there she was certain the Apache warrior was thinking of her too. Atsila stood at the edge of the canyon, looking out over the snow-covered valley below. The wind pulled at his hair and the buffalo robe around his shoulders, but he barely felt the cold. His mind was elsewhere, trapped in a moment on a mountain road, caught by a pair of eyes the color of summer sky. He'd seen white women before, had even taken a few to his blankets over the years. Brief encounters that satisfied physical need, but left no mark on his soul. The women of his own people were beautiful, strong, worthy of respect and desire. He'd never lacked for companionship when he wanted it, but the woman in the carriage, she was different. Atsila couldn't explain how he knew this, not even to himself. It wasn't just her beauty, though she was lovely. Hair the color of honey catching sunlight, skin pale as dawn, those eyes that had looked at him without fear or hatred. It was something else, something in the way she'd raised her hand to the window, as if reaching for him across the impossible distance between their worlds. Something in the way their eyes had met and held, and time itself seemed to stop. "You are troubled, my friend." Atsila turned to find Niall approaching through the snow. His second-in-command and closest friend since childhood, Niall read him better than anyone. The older warrior's face was creased with concern. "I am thinking," Atsila said simply, "about the woman in the carriage." It wasn't a question. Atsila didn't deny it. "Did you see her?" "I saw you seeing her," Niall replied. His tone was careful, neither judgmental nor encouraging. That was enough. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western horizon. The sky was turning shades of orange and gold, painting the snow-covered landscape in fire. "What will you do?" Niall finally asked. "I don't know," Atsila admitted. It was rare for him to acknowledge uncertainty. As the leader of his band of Apache, he was expected to always know the path forward, to make decisions with confidence and clarity. But this was different than any situation he'd faced before. "You could forget her," Niall suggested gently. "She is of their world. You are of ours. The distance between is greater than any mountain." Atsila knew his friend was right. The gulf between them was vast, not just the miles, but everything that came with their different worlds. Language, culture, the history of bloodshed between their peoples. The woman was white, wealthy by the look of her carriage and clothing. She probably lived in one of the towns, surrounded by the people who called his kind savages and demons. She might even be married, betrothed, promised to some white man who would give her the safe, comfortable life her people valued. The thought made something twist painfully in his chest. "I have been with white women before," Atsila said quietly. "But she—" When our eyes met, I felt something I have never felt. Like recognition. Like my soul knew hers, even though we have never spoken. Neol was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My grandfather once told me that some souls are made as pairs, split apart before birth and scattered across the world. He said that sometimes, not often, but sometimes, those souls find each other again. When they do, nothing can truly keep them apart. Not distance, not time, not even death itself." "Do you believe that?" Atsila asked. "I believe," Neol said carefully, "that when a man like you, a man who leads with wisdom and strength, who has never been swayed by fleeting passion, speaks of a woman with that look in his eyes, something powerful is at work." Atsila looked down at his hands, remembering the way the woman had placed her palm against the carriage window. Had she felt it too? That pull, that recognition? Or had he imagined the answering fire in her blue eyes? "I need to know where she went," Atsila said. The words came out before he could stop them, and once spoken he knew they were true. "I need to know who she is." Neol nodded slowly. "The carriage was headed toward Santa Fe. If she stays in the territory, she will not be hard to find. We have eyes in many places." It was true. The Apache might be fighting to preserve their way of life against the encroachment of white settlers and the U.S. Army, but they were not isolated. They traded with Mexican ranchers, maintained relationships with some of the older Spanish families, and had networks of information that stretched across the territory. "Find out what you can," Atsila said, "but quietly. I don't want to bring trouble to her door." Neol's expression was knowing. "You care for her safety and you don't even know her name." "No," Atsila agreed, "but I will." The next afternoon, Thomas Whitmore arrived at the Double L Ranch precisely at 2 o'clock, just as he'd promised in his letter. Amber watched from her bedroom window as he dismounted from a fine bay gelding and handed the reins to one of the ranch hands. He was handsome in a conventional way, tall with light brown hair neatly trimmed, a well-groomed mustache, and clothing that was expensive without being ostentatious. He moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to being welcome wherever he went. Amber felt nothing. She tried to summon some excitement, some anticipation. This was the man she was supposed to marry, the man her father had chosen, the man who would give her security, respectability, a place in Santa Fe society. But all she could think about was dark eyes watching her from the back of a paint horse, and the way her heart had thundered in her chest when their gazes met. "Miss Lockhart?" Mrs. Pemberton knocked on her door. "Mr. Whitmore has arrived. Are you ready?" Amber took a deep breath and smoothed her dark green dress, one of her finest, brought specifically for this meeting. "Yes, I'm ready." The formal parlor of the hacienda had been prepared for the occasion. A fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace, and someone had arranged fresh pinon branches in a vase, filling the room with their clean, resinous scent. Tea and small cakes had been laid out on the low table. Thomas Whitmore stood as Amber entered, and his face lit with genuine pleasure. "Miss Lockhart," he said, bowing over her hand, "your photograph did not do you justice. You are even lovelier in person." "Mr. Whitmore," Amber replied with a practiced smile, "how kind of you to say so. Please, won't you sit?" They settled into the formal dance of polite conversation, questions about her journey, comments on the weather, gentle inquiries about her family in Philadelphia and his work in Santa Fe. Thomas was articulate, educated, well-mannered. He spoke knowledgeably about the growing territory, the business opportunities, the cultural life he assured her was developing despite the frontier setting. "I know Santa Fe isn't Philadelphia," he said, with a self-deprecating smile. "But we do our best to maintain civilized standards. There's a literary society that meets monthly, and the officers' wives at Fort Marcy host regular socials. You won't lack for refined company, I assure you." "That's very reassuring," Amber said, meaning it to sound sincere but hearing the hollowness in her own voice. If Thomas noticed, he didn't show it. He continued describing the house he was building, adobe in the Spanish style, but with all the modern conveniences. I've even arranged for a piano to be shipped from St. Louis, and the life they would lead together. It all sounded perfectly pleasant, perfectly proper, perfectly soul-crushing. "I hope you don't think me too forward," Thomas said after a pause, his expression turning more serious. "But I'd like to be honest with you, Miss Lockhart. I know this arrangement isn't the romantic courtship young ladies dream of. I'm a practical man, and your father is a practical man, and this is a practical match. But I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to make you happy. I will be a respectful and faithful husband. I will provide well for you and any children we might have. And I genuinely hope that, in time, we might develop real affection for each other." He was being honest, and Amber appreciated that. Thomas Whitmore wasn't pretending to be swept away by passion. He was offering her exactly what men of his class offered women of hers: security, status, respect. It was more than many marriages started with. "I appreciate your candor, Mr. Whitmore," Amber said carefully, "and I am grateful for your consideration. It wasn't an acceptance, but it wasn't a refusal either, and they both knew it." After Thomas left, promising to call again in a few days and extending an invitation to dinner at his home, Amber fled to her room. She stood at the window, looking out at the mountains in the distance, their peaks still white with snow against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there was the Apache warrior. Was he thinking of her as she was thinking of him? Or had their encounter meant nothing to him? Just another day of monitoring the passes, another carriage allowed safe passage. "You're being foolish," Amber told herself aloud. "You don't know anything about him. You don't even know his name. And you have a duty to your family, to yourself. Thomas Whitmore is a good man. You could do far worse." But even as she said it, she remembered the way her heart had seized when she saw the warrior on his horse. The way time had stopped when their eyes met. The certainty, irrational, impossible, but absolute, that something significant had passed between them. She'd spent 23 years being practical, being dutiful, being the perfect daughter her parents expected. She'd accepted that life was about responsibilities rather than passions, about making sensible choices rather than following her heart. But what if there was more? What if that fleeting encounter in the snow had shown her a glimpse of something deeper, something real? What if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life by ignoring what she'd felt? Amber pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and closed her eyes. Deep down, beneath all the layers of social conditioning and family expectations, she knew the truth. She couldn't marry Thomas Whitmore. Not now. Not after seeing the warrior in the mountains and feeling her soul recognize his. She just had no idea what to do about it. 3 days later, Amber stood in the ranch's large kitchen watching the cook Maria prepare bread for the evening meal. Maria was a woman in her 50s, the widow of a Mexican vaquero who had worked the ranch before the Lockharts bought it. She'd stayed on after the sale, and her knowledge of the land and its people was invaluable. "Maria," Amber said, trying to sound casual, "do you know much about the Apache in these mountains?" Maria's hands stilled in the dough. Her dark eyes flicked to Amber with a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Why do you ask, señorita?" "We encountered some on the road from Santa Fe," Amber explained. "They let us pass without incident, but Mrs. Pemberton was quite frightened. I was just curious about them." Maria resumed kneading, but her expression had grown thoughtful. "The Apache are not one people, you understand. There are many bands, many leaders. Some fight against the soldiers and settlers, others try to find peace, to hold on to what remains of their land." "And the band in these mountains?" "They are led by Atsila," Maria said quietly. "It means fire in their language. He is young for a chief, perhaps 30 winters, but his people follow him because he is wise and strong. He does not seek war, but he will not surrender his people's freedom." Atsila. The name sent a shiver through Amber. She repeated it silently, feeling how it shaped her lips. "Is he dangerous?" Amber asked. Maria's laugh was soft and complicated. "That depends on who you ask, señorita. The soldiers say he is a savage who must be contained or killed. The Mexican ranchers who trade with him say he is honorable, that he keeps his word. The Apache say he is chosen by the spirits to protect them in these dark times." She paused, studying Amber with shrewd eyes. "Why do you really want to know?" Amber felt heat rise in her cheeks. When they stopped our carriage, their leader, this Atsila, he looked at me, and I've never felt anything like it, like he could see straight into my soul. She expected Maria to laugh at her foolishness or warn her away from such dangerous thoughts. Instead, the older woman's expression softened with something that looked almost like sympathy. "There are many kinds of seeing, señorita," Maria said gently, "and many kinds of being seen. Sometimes our hearts recognize what our minds cannot accept." She returned to her bread-making, but added quietly, "Atsila sometimes trades at the settlement of San Miguel, 15 miles north. On Wednesdays, usually at dawn. He brings deer hides and medicinal herbs, trades for tobacco and coffee and metal tools. The people there do not fear him because he has never brought them harm." Amber's pulse quickened. Maria was telling her where to find him. The older woman was giving her the key to something forbidden and dangerous. "Thank you, Maria," Amber whispered. "I tell you nothing, señorita," Maria replied, not looking up from her dough. "And you tell me nothing. We just talk of bread and weather, yes?" "Yes," Amber agreed. "Just bread and weather." Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear, the sky a brilliant blue that hurt to look at. Amber rose before dawn, dressed in her simplest riding clothes, and made her way to the stables. The ranch was still mostly asleep, with only a few vaqueros moving about their early morning tasks. "You're up early, Miss Lockhart," Bill Crawford said, emerging from the barn with a feed bucket. "Something I can help you with?" "I'd like to go riding," Amber said, hoping her voice sounded steady. "Just to see the countryside. I thought I might ride toward San Miguel." Maria mentioned, "There's a pretty view from the hills nearby." Crawford's weathered face showed no suspicion. "Best take one of the boys with you, Miss Lockhart. The country can be tricky if you don't know it." "I'll be fine," Amber assured him. "I'm an excellent rider, and I'll stay to the main trails. I have my father's pistol." She patted the small revolver in her coat pocket, something her father had insisted she carry in the wild territories. Crawford looked dubious but didn't argue. Within 20 minutes, Amber was mounted on a gentle mare named Estrella and heading north along the well-worn trade road that connected the ranch to San Miguel. The morning was breathtakingly beautiful. The snow from the previous week had melted in the valleys, leaving only white caps on the highest peaks. The air smelled of sage and juniper, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out as it circled on the morning thermals. Amber's heart hammered with a mixture of excitement and terror. What was she doing? Riding out alone to find an Apache warrior she'd seen once for mere seconds through a carriage window. It was madness. It was improper. It was dangerous. It was the most alive she'd felt in her entire life. San Miguel was hardly a settlement. Just a few adobe buildings clustered around a small plaza with a well. As Maria had suggested, Amber arrived just as the sun was breaking fully over the eastern mountains, painting everything in shades of gold. And there, near the well, she saw him. Atsila sat astride his paint horse, speaking with an elderly Mexican man who appeared to be examining a bundle of deer hides. 2 other Apache warriors waited nearby, but Atsila himself was unmistakable. The same proud posture, the same commanding presence that had arrested her attention on the mountain road. He wore buckskin leggings and a shirt decorated with intricate beadwork, a heavy blanket draped over his shoulders against the morning chill. His long black hair was loose except for the 2 braids at his temples, adorned with eagle feathers that caught the golden light. As if sensing her presence, he looked up. Their eyes met across the plaza, and Amber felt the same electric shock she'd experienced before. Time seemed to slow, the world narrowing to just the 2 of them. She saw his eyes widen fractionally, surprise, then recognition, then something that might have been pleasure. He said something to the Mexican trader and handed over the reins of a second horse that was carrying his trade goods. Then he turned his paint horse and rode slowly toward Amber. She should have been afraid. Every instinct of her upbringing screamed that she should turn Estrella around and gallop back to the safety of the ranch. But she couldn't move. She could barely breathe. Atsila stopped his horse a few feet from hers. Up close, he was even more striking than she remembered. His features carved with precision, his dark eyes intelligent and intense. There was a scar along his left cheekbone, barely visible, that somehow only enhanced rather than marred his appearance. For a long moment they simply stared at each other. Then Atsila spoke, his voice deep and slightly accented, but his English clear. "You came." 2 words, but they held everything. Surprise, satisfaction, and a question. "I did," Amber managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" It was a fair question, and one she wasn't sure she could answer honestly without sounding like a mad woman. I had to see you again. I don't know why. I just knew that I had to. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a warmth that transformed his stern features. I have been searching for you, he admitted, asking questions, trying to learn where you went after the mountain road. My friends thought I had lost my senses. Maybe we both have, Amber said with a shaky laugh. Maybe, Atsila agreed, or maybe we have found them. He studied her for another long moment, then said, Come, ride with me. There is a place I want to show you. It was dangerous, reckless, completely improper. Yes, Amber said. They rode together into the foothills, leaving San Miguel behind. Atsila led her along narrow trails that wound between juniper trees and red rock formations, sculpted by millennia of wind and water. They didn't speak during the ride. There was no need. The silence between them felt comfortable, natural, as if they'd ridden together 1,000 times before. Finally, they emerged onto a small plateau that overlooked a vast sweep of valley. The view was spectacular, mountains in every direction, their slopes painted in shades of ochre and rust and deep purple shadow. A hawk circled lazily overhead, and somewhere in the distance, Amber could hear the rush of a hidden stream. Atsila dismounted and moved to help her down from Estrella. His hands were gentle on her waist, but she felt the strength in them, the barely leashed power. When her feet touched the ground, he didn't immediately release her. They stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the leather and smoke and sage that clung to his skin. What is your name? He asked softly. Amber. Amber Lockhart. Amber, he repeated, and the way he said it, with careful attention to each syllable, made it sound like poetry. It suits you. Like honey from the sun. She felt herself blush. And yours is Atsila. Maria told me. It means fire. His lips curved in the ghost of a smile. Maria is a wise woman who knows when to speak and when to keep silent. Yes, I am Atsila, son of Cochise's cousin, leader of my band of free Apache. I've been told you're dangerous, Amber said, trying for levity but hearing the tremor in her voice. I am, Atsila replied seriously, to those who threaten my people, but not to you, Amber Lockhart. Never to you. Why? She asked. You don't know me. Don't I? He lifted one hand, hovering it near her face without quite touching. When our eyes met on the mountain road, I saw something that told me you are important, that you were meant to cross my path. He lowered his hand, a slight frown creasing his brow. I know it sounds like madness. No, Amber whispered. It sounds like what I felt too. They stood in silence for a moment, the magnitude of what they were acknowledging hanging in the air between them. Then Atsila took a step back, as if needing distance to think clearly. Tell me about yourself, he said, moving to sit on a flat rock that overlooked the valley. Tell me about the world you come from. Amber settled onto a nearby boulder, grateful for the excuse to look at something other than his intense gaze. I come from Philadelphia, she began. My father is a businessman, steel and railroads mostly. My mother hosts charity events and manages our household. I have a younger sister who's already married to a banker. I was educated at a finishing school. I can play the piano, speak French, and arrange flowers. She laughed, but it came out bitter. All the skills a proper young lady needs to attract a suitable husband. And did you? Attract a suitable husband? Several, Amber admitted. I rejected 3 proposals before my father decided to take matters into his own hands. He sent me here to oversee some business interests, but also to meet Thomas Whitmore, a lawyer from Boston. Father expects us to marry by summer. She saw Atsila's jaw tighten. And will you? I don't know, Amber said honestly. Before I came here, I would have said yes. I would have convinced myself it was the practical thing to do, the responsible choice. But now, she trailed off, not sure how to explain. Now? Atsila prompted. Now I've seen you, Amber said simply, and everything I thought I knew about what I wanted has been turned upside down. Atsila was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the valley. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I have been with white women before. Brief encounters, physical pleasures, nothing that left a mark on my heart. I thought I understood what I wanted from life, to protect my people, to resist the soldiers and settlers who want to take our land, to live free until my last breath. I never thought about this. He gestured between them, a helpless movement that spoke volumes. This, Amber repeated softly. You, Atsila clarified, turning to look at her. From the moment I saw you through that carriage window, with your hair like captured sunlight and your eyes that looked at me without fear, I knew. My soul knew yours, Amber. And nothing, not duty, not sense, not the entire world standing between us, will make me forget that. The raw honesty in his words stole Amber's breath. She'd never heard anyone speak like that, so direct and unguarded. In her world, emotions were hinted at, wrapped in pretty poetry and social niceties, but Atsila spoke truth like he breathed, simply, naturally, as if there was no other way. I'm scared, Amber admitted, of what I'm feeling, of how fast this is happening, of what it means. So am I, Atsila said. But fear has never stopped me from walking toward what I know to be true. He stood and moved to stand in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached out and touched her hair. His fingers were gentle, almost reverent, as he lifted a strand and brought it close to his face, studying the color in the morning light. Then, to her shock, he inhaled deeply, as if breathing in her scent. Like honey and flowers, he murmured. I thought I might have imagined it, but no, you smell like spring. The intimacy of the gesture sent heat flooding through Amber's body. Without thinking, without questioning, she reached up and touched his face. Her fingertips traced the line of his jaw, rough with morning stubble, then moved to his high cheekbone where the faint scar lay. How did you get this? She asked softly. A mountain lion, Atsila replied, his voice deepening as her fingers continued their exploration. When I was 15 winters, it taught me to respect all predators, even when they seemed defeated. Amber's hand moved to his hair, testing its texture, thick and silky, so different from her own. She traced the leather binding that held his braids, felt the smoothness of the eagle feathers woven there. You're beautiful, she whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. Men are not beautiful, Atsila said, but there was amusement in his voice. You are, Amber insisted. She let her hands trail down to his shoulders, feeling the bunched muscles there through the soft buckskin of his shirt. His arms were corded with strength, the kind that came from a lifetime of riding and hunting and surviving in harsh country. You're like the mountains, strong and wild and magnificent. Atsila caught her hands in his, stilling their exploration. His eyes had darkened, and she could see his chest rising and falling more rapidly than before. Amber, he said, and his voice was rough now, strained. If you continue touching me like that, I will not be able to keep my honor. I will want more. What if I want more too? The words came out before Amber could stop them, shocking her with their boldness. For a moment, Atsila looked like he was waging an internal war. Then, with a sound that was half groan, half surrender, he pulled her to her feet and into his arms. The kiss was everything Amber had never experienced. Hungry, desperate, filled with weeks of longing compressed into seconds. His lips moved over hers with a skill that suggested experience, but also with a tenderness that spoke of something deeper than mere physical desire. Amber had been kissed before, chaste pecks from approved suitors, brief brushes of lips that had left her feeling nothing. But this was different. This was fire and lightning, and the rush of a river breaking through ice. Her hands fisted in his shirt as she rose on her toes, trying to get closer, to merge with him completely. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Atsila rested his forehead against hers. This is dangerous, he said quietly. I know, Amber replied. Your people will not accept this. They will call you fallen, ruined. They will say I corrupted you. I don't care. You should, Atsila said, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes. I am nothing in their world, Amber. I have no money, no property they would recognize, no position in their society. I am what they call a savage. If you choose me, you choose exile from everything you know. And if I choose the life they've planned for me, Amber countered, I choose exile from my own heart. Atsila's eyes closed briefly, as if in pain. I should send you away. tell you to go back to your ranch, to marry your respectable lawyer, to forget you ever met an Apache in the mountains. But you won't, Amber said with certainty. No, Atsila admitted, opening his eyes. Because I am a selfish man. Because when I look at you, I see everything I never knew I wanted. Because the thought of you in another man's arms makes me want to burn the world down. They stood wrapped in each other, the morning sun warm on their backs, two worlds colliding in defiance of every law written and unwritten. What do we do? Amber finally asked. We meet again, Atsila said. In secret for now, until we can find a way forward that doesn't destroy you. When? Tomorrow. There's a canyon 5 miles east of your ranch, red rocks shaped like a cathedral. Can you find it? Amber nodded. I'll find it. At noon, when the sun is highest. I'll wait for you there. They kissed once more, slower this time, savoring rather than devouring. Then, reluctantly, they separated and returned to their horses. As they rode back towards San Miguel, Amber's mind was racing. She knew she was stepping onto a path that could lead nowhere good. She knew she should be afraid, should turn back while she still could. But when she looked at Atsila riding beside her, his profile strong against the morning sky, all she felt was certainty. She had found something real, something powerful, something worth fighting for. And whatever came next, she would face it with her eyes open and her heart full. The days that followed blurred into a secret world that existed only for Amber and Atsila. Every morning, she would make excuses to Bill Crawford or Mrs. Pemberton, needing to check on cattle in the eastern pastures, wanting to explore the canyons, claiming an interest in sketching the landscape. Then she would ride out to meet Atsila in hidden places he knew, locations where prying eyes wouldn't find them. The Red Rock Canyon became their sanctuary. Its towering walls formed a natural cathedral, with light filtering through gaps in the stone to create pools of golden warmth. There was a spring-fed pool at its center, surrounded by cottonwood trees that provided shade and privacy. It was there, on their third meeting, that Atsila began to truly share his world with her. My people call this place the heart of the earth, he said as they sat by the pool, their horses grazing nearby. The stories say that when the spirits created the world, this was where they gathered to rest and share their dreams. It's beautiful, Amber said, trailing her fingers in the cool water. Peaceful. It hasn't always been peaceful, Atsila replied quietly. 20 winters ago, my band had a camp near here. One morning, soldiers came. They said we had stolen cattle, though we had not. They said we must go to the reservation, give up our weapons, live on land that is dust and poison. His jaw tightened. My father refused. He said we were free people, that the Creator did not make the Apache to live in cages. What happened? Amber asked, though she could see the pain in his eyes. They killed him, Atsila said simply. Shot him in front of our people. My mother tried to reach him, and they killed her too. I was 10 winters old enough to watch, not old enough to save them. Amber's hand found his, squeezing tightly. I'm so sorry. I tell you this, Atsila continued, so you understand why I cannot simply walk into the white man's world and pretend to be civilized. That word civilized is what they called those soldiers, but there was no civilization in what they did, no honor. Not all white people are like that, Amber said quietly. I know, Atsila agreed. I have known good people with white skin, traders who deal honestly, ranchers who respect boundaries, even some soldiers who hate what they are ordered to do. He turned to look at her, his dark eyes intense. And now I know you. You who look at me and see a man rather than a savage. You who hold my hand even when I speak of violence and death. You are a man, Amber said firmly. A good one. What those soldiers did had nothing to do with you or your people. It was about their own cruelty, their own fear. Atsila lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. How did you become so wise? I'm not wise, Amber said with a sad smile. If I were wise, I wouldn't be here. I'd be back at the ranch, preparing for my wedding to Thomas Whitmore. I'd be accepting the safe, respectable life that's been laid out for me. Do you regret coming here? Atsila asked quietly. Never, Amber said immediately. These hours with you, they're the most real thing I've ever experienced. Everything else, the parties, the proper society, the rules about what a lady should and shouldn't do, it all feels like a play I was forced to act in. But this, She gestured to the canyon, to him, to the space between them. "This feels like truth." Atsila pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the cottonwoods and the gentle splash of water against stone. "Tell me about your world," Atsila said eventually. "Not the formal world of your father's business and society parties. Tell me about you. What did you dream of when you were a child?" Amber leaned into his warmth, considering the question. "I wanted to be an explorer," she admitted. "I used to read books about people who traveled to distant lands. Africa, India, the Amazon. I wanted to see things no one else had seen, to discover new worlds." She laughed softly. My mother was horrified. She said young ladies dreamed of husbands and homes, not jungles and deserts. "And yet you came here," Atsila pointed out, "to the frontier. That takes courage." "Or desperation," Amber said. "I think part of me hoped that leaving Philadelphia would mean leaving behind all the expectations too, that somehow in this new place I could be different." "You can be," Atsila said. "With me, you can be whoever you truly are." Over the following days, their meetings deepened. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Atsila taught her Apache words: Shiche, my friend; Shiye, my son; and finally, after much hesitation, Shah, my heart. Amber taught him about Philadelphia, about the theaters and libraries and streets lit by gas lamps that seemed to amaze him. "I would like to see these things someday," Atsila admitted. "Not to live there. I would die slowly in a city like a fish out of water, but to understand your world better, to see where you came from." "And I want to understand your world," Amber said. "Teach me. Show me how you live." So Atsila did. He taught her to read the signs in the landscape, how to find water by watching where birds gathered at dawn, how to recognize edible plants, how to move through rough country without leaving obvious tracks. He showed her how his people tanned leather and crafted tools, explained the meaning behind the patterns in his beadwork. "This," he said, pointing to the intricate design on his shirt, "represents the 4 sacred mountains that mark Apache land. And these," he traced lines that looked like lightning, "are for strength and protection." Amber was fascinated by everything. She peppered him with questions, and Atsila answered them all with patience and what seemed like pleasure at her genuine interest. But it wasn't just talk and lessons. There was a physical pull between them that grew stronger each day, becoming harder to resist. Innocent touches, Atsila adjusting her seat on her horse, Amber brushing dirt from his shoulder, became charged with meaning. Their kisses grew deeper, more urgent. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks into their secret meetings, everything changed. They were sitting by the pool in the Red Rock Canyon, the afternoon sun creating dancing patterns of light on the water. Atsila had been teaching Amber how to braid leather strips, something she was doing quite poorly, which made them both laugh. "Your fingers are too soft," Atsila teased, taking her hands in his to demonstrate the correct technique again. "Too used to silken piano keys." "My fingers are perfectly capable," Amber protested, but she was laughing. "You're just a terrible teacher." "Terrible?" Atsila raised an eyebrow. "I am an excellent teacher. You are a stubborn student." "I'm not stubborn." "You are very stubborn," Atsila insisted, his eyes dancing with amusement. "Like a mule, beautiful but stubborn." "Did you just compare me to a mule?" Amber demanded, trying to sound offended, but unable to stop smiling. "A beautiful mule," Atsila clarified, pulling her closer. "The most beautiful mule I've ever seen." Amber swatted at his chest, and suddenly they were both laughing, wrapped in each other's arms. But as the laughter faded, something shifted in the air between them. Atsila's hands were on her waist and her palms were pressed against his chest, where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. Their eyes met, and the playfulness evaporated, replaced by something deeper and more intense. "Amber," Atsila said softly, and the way he said her name, like a prayer, like a promise, made her breath catch. "Yes, I need to tell you something." His hands tightened on her waist as if afraid she might disappear. "These weeks with you, they have changed everything for me. You have changed everything." "You've changed everything for me too," Amber whispered. "No, let me finish," Atsila said. "I need you to understand. I have lived 30 winters. I have known many things, battle and peace, hunger and plenty, loss and survival. but I have never known this. This feeling like my heart beats only when you are near. Like the sun only shines when I see you smile. Like I would give up everything, my pride, my position, my very life, just to keep you safe and happy. Tears pricked at Amber's eyes. Atsila, I love you, he said simply. I don't know if that is the right word in your language. In mine we say Shah or Shah Nauni. My heart, or you have taken my heart. But whatever the words, the truth is the same. You are everything to me, Amber Lockhart. Everything. The tears spilled over. I love you too, Amber said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I've been trying not to admit it, trying to convince myself this was just, I don't know, fascination, or rebellion, or anything other than what it is. But I can't lie anymore. I love you. Completely. Impossibly. I love you. Atsila cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. Then stay with me, he said urgently. Don't go back to the ranch. Don't marry the lawyer. Stay here in this canyon, in these mountains. Be mine and let me be yours. I want to, Amber said. You have no idea how much I want to. But Atsila, if I disappear, they'll search for me. My father will send men. There might be soldiers. I don't want to bring that danger to your people. I would face any danger for you, Atsila said fiercely. I know, but I couldn't bear it if you were hurt because of me. They stood locked in an impossible dilemma, two people who loved each other, but were trapped by the circumstances of their worlds. Then what do we do? Atsila finally asked, his voice raw with emotion. Amber took a shaky breath. Give me time. Let me think of a way. Maybe I can convince my father that Thomas and I aren't suited. Maybe I can find a reason to stay in the territory without marrying. I just need time to figure this out. Atsila looked like he wanted to argue, to insist they run away together immediately, but he must have seen the desperation in her eyes because he finally nodded. Time, but not much. I cannot... He broke off, his jaw working. I cannot keep pretending to live my life when all I want is to be with you. I know, Amber whispered. I feel the same way. They kissed then, and it was different from all the kisses before. This was no exploration, no tentative discovery. This was claiming surrender, a mutual acknowledgement that they belonged to each other now, regardless of what the world said. Atsila's hands moved to Amber's hair, pulling the pins free until it cascaded down her back. He buried his face in it, inhaling deeply. Like honey and sunlight, he murmured against her neck. I want to remember this. If I have only this, I want to remember everything. You'll have more than this, Amber promised. We'll find a way. I promise. His lips found hers again, and this kiss was even deeper, more desperate. Amber felt herself melting into him, her body responding to his in ways that should have shocked her, but instead felt perfectly natural. When Atsila's hand slipped beneath the collar of her riding jacket, his fingers warm against her collarbone, she didn't pull away. When he eased her down onto the soft grass beside the pool, his body covering hers, she welcomed his weight. Amber, he said against her lips, his voice strained. If we continue, there will be no going back. Your people will consider you ruined. I'm already ruined, Amber said, pulling him closer. I was ruined the moment I saw you on that mountain road. My heart was ruined for anyone else, so ruin the rest of me too. Make me entirely yours. With a sound that was half groan, half prayer, Atsila surrendered to what they both wanted. His hands were skilled but gentle as he removed her clothing, piece by piece revealing her to the warm afternoon sun. And when she reached for his shirt, he helped her until there was nothing between them but skin and sunlight and the overwhelming need to be closer. Their lovemaking was tender and fierce by turns. Atsila treated her like she was precious and sacred, taking his time to learn what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. And Amber, who had been raised to believe that physical intimacy was a duty wives performed for husbands, discovered that it could be something entirely different, a celebration, a connection, a way of speaking when words weren't enough. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the grass. Atsila's buffalo robe spread over them. The sun had moved lower in the sky, painting the canyon walls in shades of deep orange and red. Amber rested her head on Atsila's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow back to normal. No regrets? Atsila asked quietly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "None," Amber said honestly. "This was the most real thing I've ever done. The most true." "For me also," Atsila said. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You are mine now, Amber. In the ways of my people, what we have done makes you my wife. I claim you before the Creator and the spirits of these mountains." "And you are mine," Amber replied, lifting her head to look at him. "I claim you right back. I don't care if there's no ceremony, no paper, no blessing from church or state. This is real. We are real." They kissed again, slowly and sweetly, sealing their private vow. But even in that perfect moment, Amber felt a shadow of worry. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And while she didn't regret it, would never regret it, she knew that the consequences would be severe when the truth inevitably came out. She just had to find a way to protect Atsila when it did. The next morning, reality came crashing back. Amber returned to the ranch to find Thomas Whitmore's horse tied outside the hacienda. Her heart sank. She'd been avoiding him for nearly 2 weeks, making excuses through Mrs. Pemberton about feeling unwell or being too busy with ranch matters. But apparently, Thomas had decided to call anyway. "Miss Lockhart," Mrs. Pemberton's voice was sharp as Amber entered through the back door. "Where have you been? You look absolutely wild. Your hair is full of grass and your dress is filthy. Have you been thrown from your horse?" "I'm fine," Amber said quickly. "I just took a longer ride than planned. Let me clean up." "Mr. Whitmore has been waiting for over an hour," Mrs. Pemberton interrupted. "It's quite rude, Miss Lockhart." "He's a busy man, and he came all this way specifically to see you." Guilt warred with resentment in Amber's chest. She knew Mrs. Pemberton was right. It was rude to keep Thomas waiting. But the thought of sitting in the parlor making polite conversation when her body still hummed with the memory of Atsila's touch felt impossible. "Give me 15 minutes, Amber said. "Tell him I was delayed on the far pastures." She rushed to her room, washing quickly and changing into a clean dress. Her hair was impossible to tame completely, but she managed to pin it up in a semblance of order. Looking in the mirror, she saw that her cheeks were flushed, her lips slightly swollen from kisses. She looked like a woman who'd been thoroughly loved. She looked happy. Taking a deep breath, Amber made her way to the parlor where Thomas was waiting. He stood as she entered, his face lighting with genuine pleasure. "Miss Lockhart, Amber, if I may, I was beginning to worry something had happened to you." "I'm sorry for keeping you waiting," Amber said, settling into a chair across from him. "I was checking on some cattle in the eastern pastures and lost track of time." "No apology necessary," Thomas said graciously. He studied her for a moment and his expression shifted to one of concern. "Are you quite all right? You look different somehow." "Different?" Amber's heart skipped nervously. "More animated," Thomas said carefully. "The first time we met you seemed somewhat reserved, but now there's color in your cheeks and your eyes are—" He trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed. "Forgive me. I don't mean to be forward. I merely noticed that the frontier seems to agree with you." "It does," Amber said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. The frontier, or more specifically, one particular inhabitant of it, agreed with her very much indeed. Thomas launched into the purpose of his visit. He wanted to show her the house he was building and discuss the wedding timeline. His manner was kind and patient, but every word felt like a weight settling on Amber's chest. "I was thinking perhaps June," Thomas said. "That would give you time to adjust to life here and for your family to travel west for the ceremony, unless you'd prefer to return to Philadelphia for the wedding." Amber's mind raced. She couldn't marry Thomas in June. She couldn't marry him at all, but she couldn't simply announce that she'd fallen in love with an Apache warrior and had no intention of honoring the arrangement her father had made. "I need more time to think about it," she finally managed. Thomas's smile dimmed slightly. "Of course, I don't mean to rush you. Don't. It's just that your father was quite eager to see the matter settled, and I thought, what my father wants and what I want may not be the same thing," Amber interrupted, more sharply than she intended. An awkward silence fell. Thomas studied her with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Amber, if you have reservations about our arrangement, I would appreciate your honesty. I'm a practical man, but I'm not a cruel one. If you truly don't wish to marry me, it's better to say so now than to proceed with reluctance." The kindness in his voice made everything worse. Thomas Whitmore was a good man. He didn't deserve to be strung along while Amber figured out how to be with the man she actually loved. "I do have reservations," Amber admitted quietly. "Not about you specifically, Thomas. You're everything my father said you were. Accomplished, respectable, kind. But She took a deep breath. "I don't love you. And I'm not certain I could grow to love you the way a wife should love her husband." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "I see," he finally said. "May I ask if there's someone else?" Amber's silence was answer enough. "I see," Thomas repeated. His expression was hard to read. Disappointment, certainly, but also something that might have been relief. "Well, I appreciate your honesty, however belatedly given." He stood, and Amber rose as well. "I'll write to your father and explain that the match isn't suitable. I'll take full responsibility for ending the arrangement, so you needn't worry about his displeasure falling on you." "Thomas, that's not necessary." "It's the gentlemanly thing to do," Thomas said firmly. "And despite what you may think, Amber, I want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me." He moved toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, if you'll permit me. Be careful. The territory can be dangerous for young women who make unconventional choices. Whatever you're involved in, whatever has captured your heart, make sure it's worth the risk." He left before Amber could respond, his footsteps echoing through the hacienda's corridors. Amber sank back into her chair, her mind whirling. She should feel relieved. One obstacle had just removed itself, but Thomas's warning echoed in her head. "Be careful. Make sure it's worth the risk." She thought of Atsila's hands on her skin, his voice saying, "I love you," the way her heart felt whole for the first time in her life when she was with him. It was worth any risk. She just hoped the world would agree. 3 days after Thomas's visit, Amber made her decision. She couldn't keep living this double life, sneaking away to meet Atsila while pretending to consider a respectable future. She couldn't keep lying to herself about what she wanted. She wanted Atsila. She wanted a life with him, whatever that looked like, and she was willing to sacrifice everything else to have it. The plan formed in her mind over sleepless nights. She would leave, not just the ranch, but the entire world she'd known. She would go to Atsila, tell him she was ready to stay with him permanently, and together they would figure out how to build a life that existed outside the rules and expectations of either of their societies. It was terrifying. It was reckless. It was the most honest thing she'd ever considered doing. On a cold morning in early March, Amber rose before dawn. She packed a small bag with her most practical clothes, the few pieces of jewelry her mother had given her that might be traded for supplies, and a leather-bound journal her sister had gifted her years ago. She left a letter for her father, trying to explain the unexplainable, asking for his understanding if not his blessing. Then, as the first light touched the eastern mountains, she rode out of the Double L Ranch for the last time. The Red Rock Canyon was quiet when she arrived. Atsila wasn't there yet. They weren't supposed to meet until later. But Amber dismounted and began to wait. Her heart was pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. She was doing this. She was really doing this. An hour passed. Then another. The sun climbed higher, warming the canyon walls and waking the birds. Amber began to worry. Atsila was always punctual, usually arriving before her. It was nearly noon when she heard hoofbeats. Amber stood quickly, smoothing her dress, preparing the words she wanted to say. But it wasn't Atsila who emerged into the canyon. It was Neol, Atsila's second-in-command, accompanied by 2 other Apache warriors. Their faces were grim, and Amber's stomach dropped. "Where is Atsila?" she asked immediately. "Is he hurt?" Neol dismounted, his expression carefully neutral. "He is not hurt, but there is trouble. Soldiers came to our camp before dawn. They say there has been a raid on a settler's ranch, cattle stolen, a barn burned. They blame us." "Did you do it?" Amber asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," Neol said flatly. "We take only what we need to survive, and we do not make war on families just trying to live. But the soldiers don't care about truth. They want someone to punish." He paused. "Atsila sent me to find you, to tell you that he cannot meet you today. Maybe not for many days. He must keep his people safe." "I'll come with you," Amber said immediately. "To your camp. I can help." "No." Neol's voice was firm. "That would only make things worse. If the soldiers found a white woman with us, They would use it as proof that we are savages who steal and corrupt. Atsila knows this. It is why he sent me instead of coming himself, to keep you away from danger." Amber felt her carefully constructed plans crumbling. "But I have to see him. I have to tell him, tell me what?" She spun to find Atsila standing at the canyon entrance. He was breathing hard, as if he'd been running, and his face was lined with exhaustion and strain. But he was here. "You were supposed to stay with the people," Niall said, his tone caught between exasperation and fondness. "And I was supposed to live my whole life according to what others expect," Atsila replied. "I am done with that." He moved past Niall and went straight to Amber, pulling her into his arms. "When Niall told me he was coming to warn you away, I couldn't let him come alone. I had to see you, even if it's only for a moment." Amber buried her face against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "I was going to leave," she said, her voice muffled. "I was going to come to you permanently. I don't care about the ranch or my father's approval or any of it. I just want to be with you." She felt Atsila's arms tighten around her. "Amber, I mean it," she said, pulling back to look at him. "I've made my choice. I choose you." The emotion that crossed Atsila's face was complex: joy, fear, love, and something that looked like pain. "I love you for that," he said quietly. "More than I can say. But Amber, now is not the time. With soldiers hunting us, with tensions this high, bringing you into our camp would paint a target on your back, and on my people." "Then what do we do?" Amber asked desperately. "I can't go back to pretending, I can't—" "You don't have to," Atsila interrupted. He cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes intense. "But you do have to be patient, just a little longer. Let me handle this situation with the soldiers. Let me prove we had nothing to do with that raid. Then when things are calmer, we'll find a way." "Promise me," Amber said, gripping his wrists. "Promise you'll come back to me." "I promise," Atsila said. "On my life, on my honor, on everything sacred, I will come back to you. Nothing will keep me from you, Amber, not soldiers, not duty, not death itself." They kissed then, desperately, as if trying to memorize each other through touch alone. When they finally broke apart, both had tears on their cheeks. "I have to go," Atsila said roughly. "If I stay longer, I won't be able to leave at all." "Be safe," Amber whispered. "Please, please be safe." "Always," Atsila promised. He touched her face one more time, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Then he turned and strode back to where Niall waited with the horses. Amber watched them ride away, her heart fracturing with every hoofbeat. She stood alone in the canyon until the sound faded completely, leaving only the wind and the calling of hawks. Then she mounted Estrella and rode back toward the ranch, though everything in her screamed to turn around and follow Atsila, regardless of the consequences. The next 2 weeks were agony. Amber moved through the days like a ghost, going through the motions of ranch life while her mind was constantly in the mountains, wondering if Atsila was safe, if he'd managed to clear his people of suspicion. Maria noticed her distress. One evening, as Amber sat in the kitchen watching the older woman prepare tortillas, Maria said quietly, "He is well, your Apache." Amber's head snapped up. "What? How do you—" "I have friends who trade with his people," Maria said, not looking up from her work. "They tell me Atsila has been meeting with the soldiers and the fort commander. He brought proof that his band was 50 miles away when the raid happened. Witnesses, Mexican traders who saw them. The commander is satisfied the restrictions will be lifted soon." Relief flooded through Amber so intensely she felt dizzy. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for telling me." Maria finally looked up, her dark eyes knowing. "You love him." It wasn't a question, but Amber answered anyway. "Yes, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "And he loves you," Maria continued. "This is clear. But love alone is not always enough, señorita. The world can be cruel to those who defy its rules." "I know," Amber said. "But what else can I do? I can't not love him. It would be like trying to stop my heart from beating." Maria sighed. "Then you must be strong. Both of you. Love will sustain you through much, but it cannot protect you from everything. You will need courage, patience, and luck." "I'll take whatever I can get," Amber said. That night, unable to sleep, Amber sat at the small writing desk in her room and added to the journal she'd been keeping since meeting Atsila. She wrote about their first encounter, about learning his name, about the way he made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. And she wrote about fear, the terror of losing him, of being separated by forces beyond their control, of discovering that love, however powerful, might not be enough to overcome the barriers between their worlds. But she also wrote about hope, because despite everything, she believed in what they had. She believed that souls like theirs, that recognized each other with such certainty, that fit together with such rightness, were meant to find a way. The question was just whether the world would let them. 5 days later, Amber was in the ranch's stable, brushing Estrella and trying not to count the hours since she'd last seen Atsila, when she heard a commotion from the yard. "Señorita!" One of the vaqueros, a young man named Miguel, appeared in the stable doorway. His face was flushed with excitement or alarm. "There is someone here to see you, an Apache." Amber's heart leaped. She dropped the brush and ran. But when she reached the yard, she found not Atsila but Neol, dismounted and speaking in low tones with Bill Crawford. Both men looked up as Amber approached. "Miss Lockhart," Crawford said carefully, "this man says he has a message for you. From the Apache called Atsila." Amber's pulse was racing. "What message?" Neol's face was unreadable. "Atsila says to tell you, come to the Red Canyon at sunset. He will be waiting." That was all. But it was enough. "I'll be there," Amber said. Crawford frowned. "Miss Lockhart, I don't think—" "I'll be there," Amber repeated firmly. "Thank you for delivering the message," she added to Neol. The warrior nodded once, then mounted and rode away without another word. The ride to the Red Canyon seemed to take forever, though Amber pushed Estrella harder than she should have. The sun was just touching the western horizon when she finally arrived, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. And there he was. Atsila stood beside the pool, his paint horse grazing nearby. He was wearing his finest clothing, buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork, his hair adorned with eagle feathers, a blanket of elk hide draped over his shoulders. He looked like what he was, a chief, a leader, a man of power and dignity. But when he saw Amber, his formal demeanor cracked into a smile that transformed his face. "You came," he said, as she dismounted. "Did you doubt I would?" Amber asked, moving toward him. "Never," Atsila replied, "but still seeing you. It's like the sun coming out after winter." They embraced, holding each other tightly. Amber felt the tension she'd been carrying for weeks finally beginning to ease. "The trouble with the soldiers?" she asked against his chest. "Resolved," Atsila confirmed. "We proved we had nothing to do with the raid. The commander was fair, more fair than many white soldiers. He even apologized for the inconvenience." "Thank heavens," Amber breathed. Atsila pulled back slightly to look at her. "I have been thinking these past weeks, about us, about what we want and what is possible." He took her hands in his. "I cannot give you the life you were raised to expect, Amber. I have no grand house, no wealth by white standards. Life with me would be hard. We would move with the seasons, live simply, face danger from those who hate what we are." "I don't care about any of that," Amber interrupted. "I told you." "Let me finish," Atsila said gently. "I cannot give you those things, but I can give you this. My heart, completely and forever. My protection, always. A life that is honest and free, lived on our own terms. And," his voice softened, "a family, if the Creator blesses us with children. They would grow up between two worlds, but they would be loved fiercely by both parents." Tears spilled down Amber's cheeks. "That's all I want. You're all I want." "Then stay with me," Atsila said. "Not just for today or tomorrow, but always. Be my wife in the ways of my people, and in the ways of yours if you need that ceremony. Let me build a life with you." "Yes," Amber said without hesitation. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Atsila released a breath that sounded like relief and wonder combined. He pulled her close and kissed her deeply, thoroughly, a kiss that tasted of promises and forever. When they finally separated, he reached into the pouch at his belt and withdrew something. "I made this for you," he said, unfolding his hand to reveal a necklace. It was beautiful. A leather cord threaded with beads in shades of blue and white and gold, with a pendant carved from turquoise in the shape of a bird in flight. "The blue is for your eyes," Atsila explained as he fastened it around her neck. "The white for your spirit, which is pure and brave, the gold for your hair, which catches light like captured sunshine, and the bird. The bird is for freedom, because with me you will always be free to be exactly who you are. Amber touched the pendant, unable to speak through her tears. And I have something for you too, she managed finally. From her pocket, she withdrew a small object wrapped in cloth. It's not as beautiful as your gift, but she unwrapped it to reveal a gold pocket watch. It had been her grandfather's, one of the few personal items she'd brought west. I want you to have this, Amber said. Not because you need to tell time by white man's methods, but because it's been in my family for 3 generations. It represents where I came from, and I want you to have it, so you know that I'm giving you all of me, past, present, and future. Atsila took the watch carefully, studying its engraved surface. I will treasure this, he said quietly, and I will treasure you, Amber, every day of my life. They talked long into the night, making plans. Atsila explained that his band would be moving to higher elevations soon, to their summer hunting grounds. It was a good place, protected valleys with clear streams, plentiful game, away from the main wagon routes and military patrols. We could build a home there, Atsila said. A cabin if you want walls and a roof in the style you're used to, or a wickiup which is easier to move when needed. Either way, it would be ours. I don't care what it looks like, Amber said, as long as we're together. There will be challenges, Atsila warned. Some of my people will be suspicious of you at first. They have learned to distrust whites with good reason. You will have to prove yourself, show that you respect our ways. I will, Amber promised. I'll learn everything. I'll work harder than anyone. You'll be yourself, Atsila interrupted. That will be enough. They will see what I see, that you have a good heart, that you are brave and honest. In time they will accept you. And what about my people? Amber asked quietly. My family? Atsila was silent for a moment. I think you must write to them. Tell them you are safe, that you have chosen this life freely. Whether they accept it or not, that is their choice. But they should know you are alive and well. My father will be furious, Amber said. He'll probably disown me. Will that break your heart? Amber considered the question honestly. It will hurt, she admitted. I do love my parents, despite everything, and my sister. But no, it won't break my heart, because I finally understand what matters, and it's not their approval, it's this. Finding the place where I belong, the person I was meant to be with. You belong with me, Atsila said simply. I know, Amber replied. I think I knew it from the moment our eyes met on that mountain road. My soul knew yours. The next 2 months passed in a blur of transition. Amber said goodbye to the ranch, and to her old life, with a mixture of sadness and relief. Bill Crawford was shocked by her decision, Mrs. Pemberton was scandalized, and Maria was the only one who seemed unsurprised. I knew from the first time you asked about him, Maria said as she helped Amber pack her few belongings, the way you said his name, like a prayer. I don't know how to thank you, Amber said, for everything you've told me, every warning you didn't give. Thank me by being happy, Maria replied, and by being true to yourself. Too many women never get that chance. Amber wrote long letters to her family, trying to explain her decision. She didn't expect understanding, but she hoped that someday they might forgive her. And then, on a warm morning in late April, she rode away from the Double L Ranch for the last time. Atsila was waiting at the edge of the property, mounted on his paint horse with a spare horse for her luggage. Ready? He asked. Amber looked back at the hacienda one last time. Everything she'd been raised to value was there. Security, respectability, her father's approval. But everything she truly needed was here, sitting on a horse beside her, offering his hand. I'm ready, she said, taking his hand. They rode together into the mountains, toward the summer grounds where Atsila's people were already establishing camp. Amber had no idea what the future held, what challenges they would face, how they would navigate between two worlds that often seemed irreconcilable. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had found her home, not a place, but a person, and that was enough. The Apache camp nestled in a high mountain valley that took Amber's breath away. Crystal streams cut through meadows dotted with wildflowers. Ponderosa pines towered overhead, their bark smelling of vanilla in the warm sun. In the distance, Snow-capped peaks stood sentinel. As they rode into camp, Amber felt dozens of eyes on her. Women paused in their work, scraping hides, grinding corn, tending fires. Men stopped sharpening tools or working with horses to watch her pass. Children stared openly, having perhaps never seen a white woman up close. The scrutiny was intense, but Amber kept her head high. She'd known this wouldn't be easy. Atsila led her to a wickiup that had been erected slightly apart from the others, not isolated but with a degree of privacy. "This is ours," he said, helping her dismount. "For now. When you're ready, we can build something more permanent." "It's perfect," Amber said honestly. The dome-shaped structure, covered with hides and brush, looked snug and well-made. Over the following weeks, Amber threw herself into learning the ways of Atsila's people. She worked alongside the women, though her attempts at tasks they'd been doing since childhood were often clumsy at first. She scraped hides until her hands were raw and bleeding. She learned to identify edible plants and medicinal herbs. She helped cook meals over open fires and taught herself to weave baskets. The women were wary at first, speaking little to her and watching her struggles with expressions that might have been judgment or simple curiosity. But slowly, as they saw her persistence, the way she never complained about the hard work, the way she treated their tasks with respect, they began to warm to her. An elderly woman named Desba took Amber under her wing. She taught Amber Apache words and corrected her pronunciation with patient humor. She showed her how to properly prepare venison and which herbs to add to stews for flavor and health. "You learn quick for a white woman," Desba said one day, her eyes twinkling. "I'm a woman in love," Amber replied in halting Apache. "That makes everything easier." Desba laughed outright at that. "This is truth. Atsila is good man, strong leader. We worried he would never find woman who could match him. Our women are too smart to take such a serious man." She sobered slightly. "You will have hard path. Some here will never accept you, but most of us. We see your heart. That matters more than your skin." The men were more difficult. Some ignored Amber entirely. Others watched her with open suspicion, clearly waiting for her to reveal herself as a spy or a weakness in their defenses. But Atsila's unwavering support and obvious happiness gradually won over even the most skeptical. Niol became an unexpected ally. Though he'd been cautious about Amber at first, he seemed to respect her determination to make the relationship work. "You surprise me," he told her one evening as they sat around the communal fire. "I thought you would run back to your people after a week of our life. It is hard, especially for someone raised soft." "I was raised soft," Amber agreed, "but I'm stronger than I look, and I'm not going anywhere. This is my home now. These are my people now." "Even when it's difficult," Niol challenged. "Even when some speak against you, even when you miss the comforts of your old life." "Even then," Amber said firmly, "because Atsila is here. And where he is, that's where I belong." Niol studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you are truly one of us, Yellowhair. Welcome." As summer deepened into full bloom, Amber discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, the tiredness, the nausea that came in waves, the way certain smells made her stomach turn, but she'd wanted to be certain before telling Atsila. It was Desba who confirmed it, studying Amber with knowing eyes one morning when the younger woman couldn't keep breakfast down. "I thought so," Desba said with satisfaction. "You carry a child. I can see it in your face, in the way you move. 2 moons, perhaps 3. Joy and terror struck Amber simultaneously. A baby. She was going to have Atsila's baby. "Don't be afraid," Desba said kindly, reading her expression. "This is good news. A child born of 2 worlds. This is a gift, not a curse. The child will be bridge between peoples." That evening, Amber led Atsila away from camp to their favorite spot, a meadow high above the valley where they could see for miles in every direction. The sunset was painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and the air smelled of pine and sage. "I have something to tell you," Amber said, her heart racing. Atsila turned to her, immediately attentive. "What is it? Are you unwell?" "No," Amber said quickly. "I'm very well. She took a deep breath. "I'm carrying your child." For a moment, Atsila simply stared at her. Then his face transformed. Joy, wonder, and something like awe flooding his features. "You're certain?" "Desba confirmed it this morning," Amber said. We'll have a baby, Atsila. By late winter or early spring. Atsila let out a whoop of pure happiness and swept Amber into his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with tears. "A child," he said wonderingly. "Our child. Amber, this is—" "I have no words." "Are you happy?" Amber asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy?" Atsila laughed. "I am beyond happy. I am blessed. The Creator has given me everything. A woman I love more than life itself, and now a child to carry our love forward." He placed his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Thank you," he said softly, "for this gift, for choosing me, for staying with me, for giving me a family." "We're giving this to each other," Amber corrected, covering his hand with hers. "This child is ours." They held each other as the sun sank below the mountains and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Amber felt a peace settle over her that was deeper than anything she'd known before. This was rightness. This was belonging. This was home. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and she knew there would be many, they would face them together. And now they would face them as a family. The final months of Amber's pregnancy passed with surprising peace. The camp moved to lower elevations as winter approached, settling in a protected valley where the snow wouldn't be as deep. Atsila built them a small cabin, a blend of Apache and frontier construction, with adobe walls and a proper door but also traditional design elements. "Best of both worlds," he said, as he showed it to her. "Like our child will be." Amber grew large with pregnancy, her belly swelling until she could barely see her feet. The Apache women, fully accepting of her now, fussed over her constantly. Desba made special teas to ease her discomfort. Younger women brought her the softest hides to sit on. Even some of the men, those who had been most suspicious of her at first, began treating her with a protective gentleness. "They see the child," Atsila explained, when Amber commented on the change. "To our people, children are sacred. They are the future, the hope that our way of life will continue. By carrying my child, you have become sacred too." In late February, during a snowstorm that blanketed the valley in white, Amber's labor began. Desba and 2 other experienced women attended her, while Atsila paced outside the cabin, wearing a track in the snow despite the cold. The labor was long and difficult, first births often were. But as dawn broke and the snow finally stopped, a baby's cry pierced the still air. Desba emerged from the cabin, her face wreathed in smiles. "A son," she announced. "Strong lungs, good color, mother and baby both well." Atsila nearly knocked her over in his haste to get inside. Amber was propped against a pile of furs, exhausted but radiant, with a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. "Meet your son," she said softly as Atsila knelt beside them. The baby was perfect, a shock of black hair already visible, his skin a beautiful blend of both parents' tones. As Atsila gently touched his impossibly small hand, the baby's fingers curled around his father's much larger one. "He's strong," Atsila said, his voice thick with emotion. "What shall we call him?" They'd discussed names for months, unable to agree. Amber wanted to honor Atsila's heritage. Atsila wanted to honor the courage it had taken for Amber to leave her world behind. "Ashki," Amber said finally. It was the Apache word for boy, but also a name that meant young warrior. And for his second name, when we need to use the white man's forms, Alexander, after my grandfather. "Ashki Alexander," Atsila repeated, "son of 2 worlds. May he inherit the best of both." He leaned down to kiss first his son's forehead, then Amber's lips. "Thank you," he whispered, "for this miracle, for everything." The years that followed were not without difficulties. There were skirmishes with soldiers who didn't differentiate between peaceful Apache and hostile ones. There were hard winters when food was scarce. There were people on both sides, white settlers and Apache traditionalists, who disapproved of Amber and Atsila's union. But there was also joy. Ashki grew into a bright, curious child who learned to speak both English and Apache fluently. He could ride before he could walk well, and he had his father's leadership qualities even as a toddler. 3 years after Ashki's birth, Amber gave birth to twin daughters, Kaya and Naomi, who were as different as sun and moon, but equally beloved. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family. Amber's parents never fully forgave her choice, but eventually they sent letters, stiffly written but present. Her sister Caroline, now divorced and living in Boston, proved more understanding. She even visited once, her eyes widening at the sight of Amber's rustic but happy life. "I never would have believed it," Caroline said, watching Amber and Atsila work side by side, their children playing nearby. "But you're truly happy." "I am," Amber confirmed. "More than I ever was or could have been in Philadelphia." The territory continued to change around them. Railroads pushed westward, towns grew, the pressure on Apache lands intensified. But Atsila navigated these challenges with wisdom, maintaining peace with neighboring ranchers while refusing to relocate to the reservation. "We have proven we can live alongside the settlers without violence," he argued to anyone who would listen. "We farm, we trade, we harm no one. This land has been ours for generations. We will not leave it." And slowly, grudgingly, their corner of New Mexico accepted the reality of Atsila's band, neither fully Apache nor fully integrated with white society, but something new, something that worked. On a warm spring evening, more than 5 years after that first meeting on a snowy mountain road, Amber sat outside their cabin, watching the sunset. Atsila emerged from inside, where he'd been settling the children for sleep, and sat beside her. "They're finally down," he said, slipping his arm around her shoulders, though Ashki wanted 3 more stories, and the twins kept giggling instead of sleeping. Amber leaned into him contentedly. "Remember when I was worried I'd made a mistake?" she said. "When I first came to live here, and everything was so hard and strange." "I remember," Atsila said. "You cried for a week, though you tried to hide it." "I didn't hide it very well, did I?" Amber laughed. "No," Atsila agreed, kissing her temple. "But I understood. You gave up everything for me. It was natural to grieve that loss." "I don't grieve it anymore," Amber said. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd married Thomas Whitmore. Living in Santa Fe society, hosting tea parties, going to church socials. Maybe we would have had children. Maybe I would have been content." "But," Atsila prompted. "But I wouldn't have been alive," Amber said simply. "Not really. Not the way I am now. This life, with you, with our children, with this community we've built. It's the most real thing I've ever known. Every challenge we've faced, every hardship we've overcome, it's been worth it. Because at the end of each day, I'm with you, and that makes everything else bearable." Atsila was quiet for a moment, his hand finding hers and lacing their fingers together. "Do you remember what I told you that day in the Red Canyon, when I first said I loved you? That your soul knew mine," Amber said. "Yes, and I told you I would hunt you until my last breath if you fled from me." "I remember," Amber said. "I did flee, didn't I? That morning after we first made love, I was so scared I ran back to the ranch." "You did," Atsila agreed, "and I nearly went mad thinking I'd lost you. But then you came back. You chose me again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard." "Just as you chose me," Amber replied. "You faced soldiers and suspicion and challenges to your leadership, all because you refused to let me go." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky deepened from gold to purple to deep blue. From inside the cabin came the sound of one of the twins crying out in her sleep, then settling again. "Do you have any regrets?" Atsila asked quietly. Amber turned to look at him, this man who had changed everything, who had seen her in a way no one else ever had, who had given her a life beyond anything she'd imagined possible. "Not one," she said firmly. "Do you?" Atsila smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "My only regret is that I didn't stop your carriage sooner on that mountain road. I should have looked in the window weeks earlier." Amber laughed. "We found each other when we were meant to," she said. "Not a moment before or after." "This is wisdom," Atsila agreed. He pulled her closer and they sat together as night fell over their valley, their home, their life. Inside, their children slept peacefully, Ashki with his father's serious expression even in sleep, Kaya and Naomi curled together like puppies. 3 beautiful children born of 2 worlds, 3 living bridges between cultures that had been at war for generations. Outside, their parents kept watch over them, 2 people who had defied every expectation and convention to build something real, something lasting, something true. The future was uncertain. It always was. But Amber and Atsila had proven that love, real, transformative, soul-deep love, could overcome even the greatest obstacles. She had fled the untamed Apache chief whose soul she ignited. He had hunted her until his last breath, or rather, until he'd caught her and made her his forever. And they had both won more than either could have dreamed. They had won each other. They had won a family. They had won a life lived on their own terms, free and fierce and full of love. And that, Amber thought as she sat wrapped in Atsila's arms under the endless New Mexico stars, was the greatest victory of all. The end. Dear listener, take a moment now and look at yourself. You're here, still here, and that is extraordinary. Maybe no one has told you today, or even this month, just how far you've come, but we see it. We see your resilient soul even when your body is tired. We see the quiet courage of someone who has faced storms, both inside and out, and still chooses to rise each day. You are made of the same strength that carried Amber through the paths of doubt, and the same light that kept Atsila standing firm in a world that tried to reject him. But above all, you are one of a kind. Many haven't made it this far. Many got lost along the way. Many could no longer bear the weight of life. But you are still here, breathing, trying, living. That is noble. That is beautiful. That is magnificent. The world tries to dim lights like yours. But your soul still burns quietly, even when no one is watching. And that's why tonight, before you fall asleep, we want to wrap you in something more powerful than any medicine. The deep, unwavering recognition that you are a rare being, a warrior, a survivor, a sacred echo of resilience in time. You have not failed. You are not behind. You are living proof that simply continuing on is already a victory. And if tomorrow brings cold winds, remember, the fire inside you has already survived far greater winters. With reverence, respect, and heartfelt gratitude, from your Wild West Whispers team, thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story touched your soul, moved your heart, or simply gave you a moment of peace, we kindly invite you to subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that love still heals, and that hope always finds a way. We also welcome your heartfelt comments. They are the wind beneath our wings. And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for supporting our channel. Your encouragement keeps us going, keeps us dreaming, and keeps us telling stories full of love, redemption, and life-changing twists. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another story from our channel. Click it and be surprised by yet another emotional journey. Thank you for being here. The Wild West Whispers team.